So I made a series of videos of why I'm very bearish for Tesla stock in the short term starting on March 5th. Now, as of March 9th, Tesla stock is down over 17%. Not looking good, very bad. However, I know this may confuse a lot of individuals who are subscribed to the channel or your viewers of the channel. You guys may be wondering, well, I thought you were bullish on Tesla. And the answer is yes, I'm very bullish on Tesla in the long term. And the reason why? Simply because Tesla has something called pricing power, which was demonstrated very well during Investor Day. I think Investor Day went over the heads of many, and really just because it was spoken through the lens of engineers. It was very boring. Everyone wanted to hear about the next generation prototypes. However, if you really paid attention towards what was said in Investor Day, you would realize that Tesla is creating a large spread between, the prices that it could offer consumers versus what the competition can offer, really because of vertical integration. So what Tesla's doing, I think, is going to set itself up for success in the next coming years. However, when we pay attention to the short term, we have to understand that we have a headwind of just economic news that does not seem good, right? And so I want to cover a few things that just happened recently and then talk about, really just cover what I see happening for Tesla in the short term as well. Now, I do think it was pretty interesting to see Cathie Wood pour roughly around $12 million into shares of Tesla stock, on March 8th. We haven't seen Cathie Wood, pour this much into Tesla since pretty much the end of December and the beginning of January when we saw Tesla rally up. However, it's pretty interesting, and I do understand the reason why she's doing it. See, if you really pay attention to the words that Cathie Wood mentions often, she's really making her projections based off the long term, right? A longer time frame, right? A larger aggregation period. She's always saying, the year 2030 when she speaks about Tesla. And so what she is probably doing right now is just every time we have these big downtrends, she's just throwing money in, right? Throwing money in. And it may seem crazy. However, I think looking back in 2030, we're going to, really tell ourselves, wow, man, it was really a great time to buy into Tesla during, 2023 and 2024, right? Especially when things were just chaotic. However, for those of you guys that trade on a shorter time frame, because one thing I do want to mention is, I do have a long-term portfolio where I invest in Tesla in the long term, but I also have a short-term trading account where I profit off the short-term fluctuations in price. And so for those of you guys that fall into that category, I want to let you guys know what are some things that I am seeing happening in the overall market. Okay, now before we go ahead and break down some macroeconomic trends, I want to highlight something that seriously contributed to a lot of the selling pressure that happened on Thursday. See, it was something that happened in the finance industry, right? Now, there's this bank that it's not a household name bank, right? Silicone Valley Bank, but trust me, this bank is literally the backbone for venture capitalism and also just startups, right, in the Bay Area, right? And so what ended up happening was, the best way to summarize it was a bank run. See, there was a lot of cash burn that was unexpected in this quarter. And so what we ended up seeing is this huge bank for startups, right, in the Bay Area in California, ended up having to sell a bunch of assets for losses, right? And so this ended up having that stock, fall down almost 60% in one day, which led to an overall of all the banks, all the other large banks selling off, right? And so this is why it's important to realize that in this current market, you want to focus on companies that actually have profit power, right? Or pricing power, right? Just like Tesla. However, while we have everything else that was, profitless, or just everything that was just dumb money going up in, 2021 and, kind of in the beginning part of 2022, what we're seeing is all that money is exiting, right? And so that's why we're going to see, just more bleeding into the overall markets. And yeah, unfortunately, we are going to see this bleed into the overall markets as more and more people and investors are getting a little bit more scared of having money and, these risk on assets. I mean, for crying out loud, if you go to wellsfargo.com and you look at their CDs, even the most unsophisticated investor could put, money into a CD and make 4% return, right? In just less than 5 months. And so we're seeing a big exodus, right? And this is obviously going to hurt companies like Tesla, but in the long run, Tesla is going to be one of those companies that survives. And so that's usually what happens during, a bear market. A bunch of companies go down, but the ones that do survive, well, those become, just companies that thrive once the good times come. But I do want to highlight some other things that I think we absolutely have to pay attention to. However, one of the things I do want to mention is, if we take a look into the SPY, right, the S&P-Y, the S&P 500 ETF index, I mentioned how, I mentioned this in my private group, so this wasn't on YouTube, this was only for my private group members. I mentioned how, obviously Tuesday where we're going to see a big movement, which is what we saw because we have Jerome Powell testifying in front of Congress. But then Wednesday was the second day where we had Jerome Powell testifying, in front of Congress, and we didn't have a big move. And the reason I said this to my private group was because, there isn't any new data or any new news, any new words coming out of Jerome. Everything he said on Tuesday was already said. So it wasn't like we were going to have him change his mind for Wednesday. And so that's why we saw really a lot of sideways movement. And I mentioned to my private group that Thursday was when we were going to see a big play in the market. Now, obviously, I didn't think the play was going to be so big because that, was due to the fact of what happened in the finance industry. However, I want to, again, just stay back on track and mention some things that we have to pay attention to going forward. Now, I mentioned this in a few other videos, but one of the things that we want to pay attention to are some dates that have some big data coming out. One date that sticks out in particular is going to be March 14th, where we have the CPI data come out, right? Now, this is a date where you want to put your microscope on and you really want to hone in on what happens on this date, right? Because at that time, we're going to find out whether CPI comes hotter or whether it comes out cooler. Now, I'm not someone who's going to make any predictions and try to bet and gamble on what it may be because that's like flipping a coin. At the end of the day, we don't know. So we have to be patient and wait to see what happens because obviously this could change everything drastically, right? So if we have CPI come out hotter than expected, well, that's a big no-no, right? That's because we already heard talks from, members of the FOMC that, hey, if, things come out hotter than expected, well, we're going to have to, turn the oven on a little bit hotter and we're going to have to raise by 50 basis points. And that's going to be no good for the overall market. That's not going to be good for Tesla. So that's why you want to pay attention to that date. Now, if it comes out cooler than expected or cool, right? Well, guess what? We may only hike by 25 basis points. And even though that's bad, right? Because obviously you're still hiking rates, right? The overall market, it's going to already have that, priced in. And so we may even see Tesla and the overall market rally up. Now, another important date that you want to pay attention to is going to be St. Patrick's Day. And that is because the coupon code where you get 69% off to the Push and Profit private group expires on, March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day. So definitely check out the first link in the description below because that's where you're going to have access to my private group where you get updates on what stocks I'm looking to trade and the reason why. You have access to my trade ideas. You get all the updates that I can't put in my YouTube videos because obviously it's much quicker to just type in the private group, right, than obviously make a whole entire video about it. So definitely pay attention to that date. Now, bringing it back overall to Tesla, like I mentioned early in the beginning of the video, I am bullish on Tesla in the long term, right? It's just during these, conditions, I'm not so bullish. And I know that may, trip some people out because a lot of people tend to be, dogmatic, right? They tend to be perma bulls or perma bears, and the markets are much more dynamic than, just looking at things from one side, right? It's not just two-dimensional, right? And so, without hurting anyone's feelings, right? Because obviously we have to be realistic, a lot of people lose money in the market, right? Because they're dogmatic. They can't see things from different perspectives. And so that's why I encourage you guys to really just understand why, going on for Tesla in the short term, I'm not very optimistic. And even if we go to, I'm looking at the chart right now, even if we go to 150, I'm still not that optimistic. In fact, this may throw some people off, but I'm really not going to be focused, or too optimistic on Tesla until we hit an area of like maybe 120, right? And I could be wrong, and maybe I miss out a little bit of the move, but guess what? I protect myself from obviously buying in when things are high and coming down. So that's definitely something I want you guys to really just be aware of, that, right now is just not the best time for Tesla. Yeah, if you're just an investor, yeah, of course, as it goes down, you could do the Cathie Wood style and just pour money in and, not really have to worry about it because that, or you don't know, but you have a strong conviction that in, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, Tesla is going to be a phenomenal company, right? But at the moment, if you're someone who's looking at the shorter duration of things, it's not looking good for, Tesla. And it's nothing against Tesla. They're doing all the right things that they could possibly do. but there's just some things that are out of their hands, like, you know, what's going on with monetary policies and fiscal policies. So we're gonna have a lot of data come out, and that's why I want you guys to be, you know, warned of what could possibly happen. Now, we may see a little bit of, you know, some sideways days, some green days as well, because the market doesn't, you know, tend to go straight down, right? It doesn't just go down. Typically, after we have big red days, we tend to have some days where we move sideways or move slightly up. But overall, the longer direction from what I'm seeing looks like things are going to be bleeding a little bit more. But you guys let me know in the comments section below, what are your thoughts for Tesla? What are your thoughts on the CPI report? Again, you know, I don't trade based on guessing what it's going to be, but if we had to make a prediction, you guys could let me know in the comment section below. Do you think CPI is going to come out hotter than expected? Inflation is getting worse? Or is it, you know, going to be cooling off? So we'll have to see. But with that being said, guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to watch this video right over here. I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care, guys.